Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm Paige. I'm an alcoholic. And yeah, welcome everyone. And so where we're picking up in the book is in the foreword to the second edition. Now, unfortunately, we're in the foreword, so it's Roman numerals, so we'll do the best we can to find it. So where we're at is XVIII. A good way to find it is you find the foreword to the third edition and you flip back a page, flip back another page, and that's where we are. And we're at the very bottom paragraph of XVIII. And not just to give people time to find the page, but we'll think that I'm doing that because I'm super thoughtful. Throw that out there. But I'll do a little bit of review. Not a whole bunch, but it's important to see what are we talking about here. And what we would have read and ended up on last week was the tremendous growth of the Fellowship Alcoholics Anonymous. This book, Alcoholics Anonymous, was published and it went out to the world. And from that point on, growth was rapid. So they went from 80 members split between, maybe 3 or 4 cities to, by the time this book was published at the end of 1939, where they were at 800. And so think about your home group. Think about, going to a meeting at your home group. Maybe you have 10, maybe you have 20, maybe you got 80. Ooh. And in less than, or about, just over 6 months, it grows from 20 to 200. And then in a couple years to go to 2,000. And that was the dramatic growth of the fellowship. And I'll point that out for a couple reasons. One is what we have here works. Alcoholics Anonymous works. The steps as directed out of this book, which is called Alcoholics Anonymous, it works. And as a result, people were getting well and staying well. There was an answer here, a solution here. But also, when you get a whole lot of alcoholics together, it's like you got a bunch of drunks with whippersnippers. It's a little dangerous. You know what I'm saying? So, bottom paragraph, XVIII. Our society then entered a fearsome and exciting adolescent period. Now, the adolescent period is the teenage years. Now, some of us might have kids that are in the adolescent period, and it is fearsome. And all of us, if we're here, we survived those fearsome and exciting adolescent periods. But it was a little touch and go, at least for me, for a while. So the tumultuous teenage years of our fellowship. Oh boy, there were a lot of spiritual slam doors and sulking, and it's just a phase, Mom. Spiritually, that was what was happening in Alcoholics Anonymous. I imagine Dr. Bob going through an emo phase, you don't get it, Mom. He didn't. I don't think any of the history husbands are here, so, but you can tell him I said that. I don't mind. So it said the test that it faced was this. Could these large numbers of erstwhile erratic alcoholics successfully meet and work together? So this listen, go to your home group. They are erstwhile and goodness gracious, they are erratic. They are all over the place, Could we live and work together? Would there be quarrels? That means a fight. Would there be fights over membership, leadership, and money? And what's interesting about those questions, we look at power, property, prestige. Those are often the things that I am drawn to. Those are often the things that I make false higher powers in my life. And so I can look at, have I made those? Because they're very, very tempting gods, I got a little money in my pocket, I'm okay. I got a little influence, little social capital. Somebody used the word social capital the other day, and I was like, I don't know what that means. I'm socially bankrupt, is what I am. I don't got that money, that capital. But could we work together, or would we have fights? Would there be strivings for power and prestige? Right? I know nobody here relates to that desire for control. And it doesn't, and I will point out, no, it never looks like a desire for control. It just looks like they're not doing it right. And I've got to go in there and fix it. Again, I'm sure nobody relates to that. I'm the only one. Would there be schisms? And these schisms would be these different sects of AA, which would split AA apart. schisms based on religion or political affiliation or ethnicity. Keep in mind in 1939 in parts of the United States, there were places where white people and black people couldn't even exist in the same room together. It was illegal. Like, that was the part of the tumultuous society in which Alcoholics Anonymous was born in. And it says soon AA was beset by these very problems on every side and in every group. So one of the things, what we're going to be talking about is the 12 traditions. And often I think we have the idea that we don't literally have the idea of this, but I'm throwing it out there. Oftentimes I think we have the idea that the 12 traditions came from a little drunken angel, down from on high. Here is a good idea for your business meetings. And I will assure you that's not the case, not even a little bit. These 12 traditions, Bill Wilson talks about, they were hammered out on the anvils of experience. What that means is we learned these things by doing it wrong, by making mistakes. And I think that's really important, because when we're new, nobody cares about the traditions. Let's be real. It's like, what is all that Folderol about? Like, who the heck cares? Like, it just looks like just more things that are confusing and overwhelming and doesn't apply to me. And what happens is we're learning and we're growing in this thing. We make mistakes. And I don't like using the word we break the tradition. I like it more as we're more out of the bounds of the tradition, but we all know what it's like to make a mistake, to announce a non-AA thing at an AA event, or to not know and to do something not in line with the tradition. And then we'll have that acerbic person, or that person saying in an acerbic way, "You're breaking the tradition," and to try to instruct with shame. Now, I will let you know, I don't do well with shame. That is not a good motivator for me. Oh, and Bill Wilson talks about how we are sensitive people, and it takes a long time for us to outgrow that serious handicap. I just fall into me, fall into self, fall into self-centeredness and that pain, and that's not helpful in my experience. But what is helpful is showing up in that place of education and learning and supporting, and hey man, I know your intentions were good. This is why we do it in that way. So that's my little rant about traditions. But actually, I shouldn't say that's my little rant about the traditions, because we're about to go into the traditions, rock and roll. And some of you are like, oh gosh, oh no, what are we on about here? So these traditions came out of the anvils of experience. We learned by doing it wrong. And so it says, but out of this frightening and at first disrupting experience, because it was frightening, it was disrupting, the conviction grew that AAs had to hang together or die separately. We had to unify our fellowship or pass off the scene. And I'll tell you two things. That's probably a lie. I'll probably say 6, because I'll go on tangents. But the first thing I will let you know is what got me interested and involved in the traditions was not a desire to grow more in Alcoholics Anonymous. And oh boy, that sounds interesting. Tell me more about Tradition 8. I will. No, it had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with experiencing huge possibly group-ending disruptions in my home group. And unfortunately, I was the person that had the most amount of time, which wasn't much. And I'm like, what do I do? It was out of necessity that I learned and began to see the importance of applying these things, which is how they were developed. But when it says we had to unify our fellowship or pass off the scene, if you're writing in your book, and I do hear that that's what the cool kids are doing today, unless you're driving, in which case you're very cool, please be safe. But you can make a little note that is Tradition 1. Tradition 1. That idea that our unity has to come first. What we're talking about is the survival of Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole needs to come first, because if Alcoholics Anonymous does not survive, The individual alcoholic likely will not. And so that's the idea of tradition 1. And all of these traditions are meant to preserve Alcoholics Anonymous so we get to continue to be alive and sober. And it says, as we discovered the principles by which the individual alcoholic could live. Now, the principles that we get to live as individuals, those are the 12 steps. That's what they are. But one of I'll keep reading. So we had to evolve principles by which the AA groups and AA as a whole could survive and function effectively. And keep in mind, alcoholics, as a rule, we don't like rules. Like, don't tell me what to do. You tell me what to, actually, I had this experience. It was, I was right after I got sick, and I was dying of like self-pity, and I was in a lot of pain, and it was incredibly traumatic to have a life-changing illness and a life-changing disability. And I remember one day I was in a car with a gentleman, and he was saying, but Paige, I feel emotionally handicapped, which was not a good lead to him then giving me advice. To which he said, you have to write a gratitude list. And I want you to know, I didn't, because that'll show him I was miserable. You tell me what to do, I'm going to do the opposite. I don't drive that way. So these traditions are not rules, but they are principles that are spiritual in nature. The 12 traditions are not so much, it feels that way and it reads that way, you must not, but instead they are ideals that allow us to grow. And also a really cool thing about the 12 traditions is they are not just applicable in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Of course, that's where they're most applicable, but I can apply these 12 traditions in relationships, romantic, platonic, friendships. I can apply them at work. I can apply them with family. I can apply them in traffic. I can apply these 12 traditions wherever I go. And so when I look at the traditions, I look at what does the tradition mean for me? Because, still a little selfish, self-centered. What about me? Woo! Tradition 1 means I get to come here because y'all are still here. Woo! But then, because I'm a recovered member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I also have to look at what is my responsibility to the tradition. Who do I need to show up to, embody, to live up to help preserve the spiritual principle of that tradition, which is another way of showing up. And then I can look at how does this tradition apply outside the rooms. So, and again, the traditions, in tradition 12, it talks about how anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all these traditions. So the foundation of the 12 traditions is anonymity. But we often misunderstand what anonymity means. Anonymity does not mean we don't know each other's last names. In fact, that's kind of the worst thing is, when one of your home group members is in the hospital and y'all get together and you show up and you go to the hospital and they're like, what's the patient? And it's like, Dumpster Joe. And they're like, sorry, what? You know what I mean? It's like, I've known him for years. I've babysat his kids. I know his deepest, darkest secrets. What's his last name? HIPAA won't let you in. You know what I'm saying? So that's not anonymity. And to be fair, anonymity does tie in with confidentiality. But far greater is anonymity, is the spirit of humility and selfless service. That is what anonymity is, that I'm no better than you, that I'm no worse than you, that I'm equal to you, that humility and that selfless service, that giving without expectation. That is what pervades these 12 traditions. So it was thought that no alcoholic man or woman could be excluded from our society. If you're writing your book today, that is tradition 3. That all who suffer or may suffer from this illness are welcome. It says that our leaders, we have leaders in Alcoholics Anonymous, we do, but that our leaders might serve but never govern, which is good because I told you about how we naturally respond to you don't tell me what to do. You know what I mean? right? So we do have leaders in Alcoholics Anonymous, but their role is to serve. And again, that is the second tradition. And I'll just real quickly, I love tradition 2, because tradition 2 tells me who makes decisions in Alcoholics Anonymous. The good news is it's not the drunks, because that's not good, and it's not me. Goodness gracious, it's good it's not me. But in tradition 2, it talks about the decision maker is a loving God, as that God, that power, that higher power may be expressed in the group conscience. That's who makes decisions. And that's beautiful. And I'll throw this out, that radically changes how I show up to a business meeting, doesn't it? You know, I got to show up with that connection to channel that spirit, but also to listen. I know, listen to that spirit, that power flowing through often the person that I disagree with the most. That's who I have to. By the way, when we talk about principles before personalities, we think I got to put spiritual principles ahead of your personality. I got to put it in front of my personality. That's where it's got to go. Anywho. So it says that each group was to be autonomous. That is tradition 4. Now, autonomy is to have the freedom to make its own decisions. And I talk a lot about how tradition 4 is the Spider-Man tradition. Pew, pew. Because you guys remember in Spider-Man where it's like with great power comes great responsibility. It's like that. Tradition 4 with great autonomy, the freedom to do as I feel called. There is the responsibility. So we have the freedom to make decisions, to read whatever conference-approved literature we want, but the responsibility to consider Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole and other groups. Spider-Man, pew pew. You can tell that sometimes they don't ask me to do talks on the traditions, and I can't figure out why. Oh. And it says that there were to be no professional class of AA therapy. That is tradition 8. And some of you are like, girl, we can tell you're not a professional. That's apparent. But that idea of tradition 8 is that freely do we receive, freely we give. That we don't have paid 12 steppers. As I was telling you about my social capital, I don't have capital either. You know, I don't got money. We are not paid to do this. And that allows that the true spiritual gifts of Alcoholics Anonymous to be maintained. So it's not like we have, professionals that are that's a professional sponsor. No, we're all equal and shoulder to shoulder in this thing. That there were to be no fees or dues. Our expenses were to be met by our own voluntary contributions. That's tradition 7. And if we have to put the tradition 7 announcement in the chat, now would be a good time. It's honestly, if your group's doing a little sparse, it's like, what's the topic? What are we talking about? Tradition 7. That'll get it in. But that idea that like you go to a gym, you have to pay a gym membership. There's places where you have to pay to belong. And that's not what it is here. We don't have to pay to belong. In fact, the price we paid to belong was paid in the horrors of our active alcoholism. We already paid that price. But we get to be self-supporting. We get to pay our own way and not accept money from outside sources, which gives us the freedom, Spider-Man, pew pew, to run this thing as we so feel called. And that is beautiful. When I pay my own way, I get to make my own decisions. You can see, and some of you who are working with children in their exciting and adolescent period have probably said, when you have your own house, you can do things your way. It's like that, right? Alrighty. So it says, there was to be the least possible organization even in our service centers. That is tradition 9. And we all know what it is like to go to a meeting, the coffee's not made, we don't have somebody to share the Zoom screen or whatever it is. What's the joke we make? We ought not be organized. Now, fair enough. Have I made that joke? Absolutely. But is that what we're talking about? Technically, no. Now, that is me being pedantic without any purpose. Just pedantic over here. But what are we talking about? Alcoholics Anonymous does not have a service structure in the way that most businesses, corporations, governments sort of exist. You see, we don't have the AA CEO or AA Grand Pumbaa, thank goodness. Because who would it be? It would be the person in your home group, the one that you're like, please don't let that person be in charge. That's who it would be. I just promise you that, And we don't have like CEOs, CFOs, managers, middle managers. We don't have that hierarchical structure. In fact, our structure is a reverse pyramid. Now, that might not make sense to you, but what it's saying is the most powerful position that I can have is simply a member. And any position I take in service is that being of service. Now, I am a visual metaphor sort of person, so I'll give you one. It's a little like coming to Alcoholics Anonymous is a little like showing up at a restaurant. If I come to AA, I get to sit down and I get served. But I sit here long enough and there's a need for me to be of service to others. And I get to show up and be a server at the restaurant. And I take a service position. Shout out if you want to get a service. We got opportunities available at ODAAT. Get involved with the service team who's doing a wonderful job. I love you guys. We do. But you get involved in a group and then I am serving the table that is my home group and the people who come. And then we get maybe involved a little more at service. Maybe we're the GSR and we get involved at our home group, the table that is our home group, and then the table that is the district or the area. And then we get, you know what I mean? So it's not that I climb this corporate ladder of success. Look at me. It is that I am serving more tables. That's what it means when we're not organized. We start on time, we end on time, although Peppa lets me go a little bit late. So, which is a shout out to Peppa. We're not going to call her out on that. She's delightful. Alrighty. So our public relations, so this is at the public level, we're based upon attraction rather than promotion, tradition 11. So we're not saying, hey, we're the best thing ever. Anything else sucks. Come join us or you're lame. This is why it's good I'm not in charge. I don't have good marketing strategies. That's not our public relations policy. But our public relations policy is, if you think you might have a problem with alcohol, we might be able to help. We just let people know that we exist. We do have to let them know we exist at the public level, but we're not like, we're the best thing in town. Woo! So, and then it says, it was decided that all members ought to be anonymous at the level of press, radio, TV, and films. And again, that is tradition 11. So thank goodness we don't have a spokesperson, because again, it would be the least likely person. And actually, when I was kind of in the worst of my alcoholism was also when Lindsay Lohan seemed to be in the worst of hers. And Lindsay Lohan, I felt like we were on a death race together, and it wasn't looking good for either of us for quite a while. But I always in my mind, it's like, could you imagine if Lindsay Lohan was the spokesperson for AA? Like that. Like, thank goodness we don't have a spokesperson, right? So we are anonymous at the public level. It says, and in no circumstances should we give endorsements, which would give endorsements, make alliances, or enter into public controversies, which is tradition 6, where we have no affiliation, and tradition 10. So what we're seeing is the 12 traditions. Spoilers, it's going to say that. So this was the substance of AA's 12 traditions, which are stated in full on page 561 of this book. So we got the traditions, and we got the long form and the short form, because there's both. And when you dive into the long form, it's delightful. That might be subjective, but I will, if you guys are doing AA trivia, I want to give you the leg up so you win. So I want you to know that the short form of tradition 2 is longer than the long form. So the long form of tradition 2 is shorter than the short form. That's just my AA trivia for you, like a little nugget so you can win. Or we don't need to make it that competitive. It's fine. Just participate if you want. Alrighty. So it says, though none of these principles, again, these are principles spiritual in nature, had the force of rules or laws. They became so widely accepted by 1950 that they were confirmed by our first international conference held at Cleveland. And what I'll say too is I love that the first international was in Cleveland, because you just know Akron and New York were probably fighting about where it should be. And then Cleveland was like, I'll take it. Cleveland was settling. But if you're from Cleveland, no, you need not settle. Cleveland is lovely. I got to visit. And this year, we're going to have the International. It's going to be in Vancouver. So come along if you want. I won't say it's what all the cool kids are doing, because sometimes it can be hard to get in and to travel. But all the cool kids are here today. That's what you guys are. Focus page already. And if you're actually interested in the traditions but like, there's literature on it. There's the 12 and 12, like the 12 steps and 12 traditions. There's also AA Comes of Age, which is a wonderful book on the history and how the traditions came together. But if you're just looking for little snippets, Bill Wilson in the 1940s, he wrote essays on the 12 traditions to be published in the grapevine, because he kind of had to sell the fellowship on the traditions, because we're living in our teenage years and you're giving me things that look like rules and I don't want them. So if you're ever interested, the grapevine articles on the 12 traditions are so interesting. So it says today the remarkable unity, and that is tradition 1. And I will point out, when we talk about the unity, we are unified, but what are we unified around? The unity that we have in tradition 1, we are unified around tradition 5, our primary purpose. So I'll just throw that out there. So today, the remarkable unity of AA is one of the greatest assets that our society has. While the internal difficulties of our adolescent period were being ironed out, and I bet it was Carolina that was doing the ironing, because she's like the ironing queen. She's on it, girl. It was anvils of experience, but as they were being ironed out, public acceptance of AA grew by leaps and bounds. So the public finding out and being like, hey, this AA thing is okay, it grew. And it says, for this, there were 2 principal reasons, so 2 main reasons why this thing grew and took off. It says, 1, the large numbers of recoveries. This thing was working. It was working, and reunited homes. So it wasn't just the alcoholic that was getting well. The family was also beginning to get well and to be restored and to be healed. These made their impressions everywhere. Now, again, what we're going to get into, I know some of you are like, oh no, we're going to do math. Woo! I can see like the glazing over. It's like, oh, what is all this Folderol about? Like math again? I'm going to do the math. Don't you worry, for those of you who are like having algebra flashbacks right now, I'll do it. I'll do the math. But we're going to see. So it says, of this end of the paragraph is super important. So it says, of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried. Now we're going to come back to that really tried, because it feels like, how do you make something like that? How do you make something that quantitative? It doesn't feel like you can put a number or statistic on really tried. What does that look like? We're going to come back and explain what really tried looks like. So of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way. So between 1939 and 1955, what we were seeing was a 50% success rate. 50%. That off the bat. And then it says 25% sobered up with some relapses. And so what we see at this time in history, the success was 75%. A 75% success rating in Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, when you're here and you're like me, you're like, oh, I'm going to be the 25 that doesn't make it because I just assume, you know what I mean? I just assume. If there's one thing I can assume is that we're 100% of us think we're in that 25%. It can't be me, you know? But what I will say is, what is the success rate that I am bringing to Alcoholics Anonymous? And I love you guys so much, but I will point out, if you're hanging out with me on a Wednesday, you're rocking a 0% success, right? You're not able to do it on your own because you'd be doing better things. I'm so glad you're here. But it is a 0% success rate. I've got 0. And we're seeing here something as high as 75%. Now, I'll point something else out, but just one second. It says other thousands came to a few those who stayed on with AA showed improvement. So, you know, the remainder who stayed on, there was improvement, even though they were struggling. Other thousands came to a few AA meetings and at first decided they didn't want the program. This is important. There is a stark difference between the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Meetings are wonderful, and I love them. And for some reason, I have never had a hard time going to meetings. It's just been the easiest thing, but I'm cursed with sponsees who have a hard time going. Just, you know, some cosmic law or something. I love meetings. The fellowship is wonderful. But the fellowship, the meetings are not the program. So the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is the 12 steps as taken out of this book. So when we talk about of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, it's not people that were doing 90 and 90. It's not people that were coming to meetings. It's not even people that came to meetings and got a home group and were involved and maybe got a sponsor, perhaps in name only. It is who really tried at what? At all 12 steps as a way of life. That's what we're talking about. So those who came to AA and really tried all 12 steps as a way of life, because that is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, that was the success rate. Now, oftentimes we talk about, in AA, the success rate isn't that good. Well, I've read some studies where it's better than any sort of alternative for alcoholics. But also my experience looking and being here for a while, I have never, I'm not saying it couldn't happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I have never seen anyone who was fully engaged with Alcoholics Anonymous relapse. I've seen a lot of people come to meetings and drink again. I've seen a lot of people come and sort of start on a 4th step or sit on a 4th step and drink again. I've seen a lot of people avoid amends. I've seen people have dramatic and powerful spiritual experiences, and that's always the most heartbreaking. And they get complacent and they drink again. And I've seen that. But I have never, ever, I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I have never seen anyone doing this deal. Sponsoring others, praying, meditating, evening review, doing their 10 steps, made their amends. I've never seen anyone there relapse. I've just never seen it. And so that's what we're talking about. It goes on to say, other thousands came to a few AA meetings and at first decided they didn't want the program, but great numbers of these, about 2 out of 3, began to return as time passed. Why would they come back? Because they could not find an answer anywhere else. And there were people here who were getting well and staying well. Now, I'm going to do a little bounce, just a little baby bounce. So I hope you'll bounce with me. Let's bounce over to the medical view on AA, which is on page 569. And 569, it's right in the back of the book. It's right after the spiritual experience appendix, the medical view on AA. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to the 3rd paragraph where it says Dr. G. Kirby Collier, who is a psychiatrist. So 3rd paragraph, 569. Dr. G. Kirby Collier, psychiatrist. I have felt that AA is a group unto themselves. Ooh, some tradition forward, got some autonomy, Spider-Man, pew pew. And their best results can be had under their own guidance. Tradition 2. And actually a lot of the other traditions help protect that, like tradition 7, tradition 6, tradition 10 really help protect that. As a result of their philosophy, any therapeutic or philosophical procedure which can prove a recovery rate of 50 to 60% must merit our consideration. So again, we're seeing consistently solid numbers. And what is my success rate? 0. I've got a 0% batting average. And that works for baseball, but I know in the UK, I don't know if in cricket, do you guys do batting averages, if that's a thing? I don't know. The wickets, the Ashes, sports. I can tell there's not a lot of cricket fans because I have not been strongly corrected. Okay. And then just a point of information, the next paragraph, Dr. Harry M. Tebow, he was Marty Mann's doctor and a little influential guy in AA. So, fun facts. Alrighty, back to page XX, forward to the second edition. Thank you for bouncing with me. I know it's especially cumbersome to bounce around when we're in Roman numerals. We're going from the very start to the very back. So thank you for your patience. All right. Page XX. Another reason for the wide acceptance of A was the ministration of friends. Like we were overwhelmed by friends, non-alcoholic friends, friends in medicine, religion, and the press. You know, friends like we were talking about John Alexander. I love my homegirl sister Ignatia. She was a non-alcoholic nun that worked at the hospital, St. Thomas Hospital in Akron, Ohio, who helped us immensely. Like we were helped by by people who were non-alcoholic who loved us and supported us. So friends in medicine, religion, and the press, together with innumerable, that's too many to count, others who became our able and persistent advocates. Because it's far better to let other people recommend us than us to be like, hey, we're the best. Look at us. We kick butt. We're awesome. AA, rock and roll. Woo. It's way better to let other people say, hey, they seem to have something there. So, it says, without such support, AA could have made only the slowest progress. Some of the recommendations of AA's early medical, we just popped over to that medical appendix. Yeah, we did. And religious friends will be found further on in this book. Alcoholics Anonymous is not a religious organization. Neither does AA take any particular medical point of view, though we cooperate widely with the men of medicine as well as the men of religion, because in those early days, we didn't have the luxury of just showing up to meetings. We had to do hospital and institution work and public information work, because these, at the time, hospitals and people of religion often knew where the alcoholics were and could direct them and help us find them. So it goes on to say, alcohol being no respecter of persons. Alcohol being no respecter of persons, what that means is that anyone can be an alcoholic. Doesn't matter my age, my gender, my race, my culture, my background, my socioeconomic status, my social capital that I do not have. None of that matters. Any of us. Well, we all have alcoholism, but anyone can be an alcoholic. So alcohol is no respecter of persons. It says we're an accurate cross-section of America, and in distant lands, the same democratic evening up process is now going on. When we talk about that democratic evening up process, what that means is by that same token, anyone can recover from alcoholism. Anyone can recover. That is what it's saying. Now, what's in my book might look a little different than what's in yours. But in my book, it says, by personal religious affiliations, we include Catholics, Protestants, Jews, Hindus, and a sprinkling of Muslims and Buddhists. More than 15% of us are women. Now, in 2025, that's not like, ooh, you're going to brag about that. But keep in mind, in 1955, in parts of the United States where people of different backgrounds could not congregate, could not be together, and parts of, like Ireland where people could not congregate together based on religion. That's actually 1955, 15% are women. They include Catholics, Protestants, Jews, Hindus, as well as some, I didn't know that. So Paul put in the chat, in 2019, 51% women. So there has been a democratic evening up process. More than 15% of us are women. So it's grown. But keep in mind, we like those early, man, there is a lot to say for those early like pioneers, the first women, or the first, people that were African American, or the first, the trailblazers, because that is not easy. But what it's talking about is, alcoholism affects anyone, and anyone can recover. So it says, at present, this is in the 50s, 1955, our membership is pyramiding. So it's growing at a rate of about 20% a year. So far, upon the total problem of several million actual and potential alcoholics in the world. Now, they were going to write a chapter to the potential alcoholic that never came into fruition. That's part of why they reference the potential alcoholic. But I want y'all to know, when I got here and I read potential alcoholic, first time in my life I ever thought I had potential. I'm like, oh, that's me. I am the potential alcoholic. I've just got little baby alcoholism. So I just need to do AA light, diet AA. Turns out full blown, all the real deal over here. Got to do all the stuff. Oh, 3 legacies and everything. This silly little drunk. So, but it says, so far upon the total problem of several million actual and potential alcoholics in the world, we've made only a scratch. In all probability, we shall never be able to touch more than a fair fraction of the alcohol problem and all its ramifications. And there's humility to say we cannot be all things to all people. And there are ramifications of alcoholism that are outside of the scope of what we are able to offer. And what we offer in AA is a spiritual awakening that happens as the result of the 12 steps. That's what we have to offer. Of course, we have meetings and coffee, and sometimes there's biscuits, and fun and fellowship and all that. But that's what we have to offer, a solution, a way out. And it says, upon therapy for the alcoholic himself, we surely have no monopoly. And that is beautiful humility. What we're saying is, we're not the only thing you can try. We're not even going to say we're the best thing. There are options. There are options that you can try. But this is so true. It says, yet it is our great hope that all those who have as yet found no answer. So we're not saying we're the only thing to try, but man, if you're like me and you tried everything you could think of and nothing that you have tried work, our hope, our great hope, is that you can find the answer here. And that you may begin to find one in the pages of this book. This is the treasure map. These are the directions that begin to give us freedom and hope in a new way of life. And it says, and will presently join us on the high road to a new freedom. Not high vacation destination resort. It's a road. It is a path. It is a way of life. I cannot set it and forget it. I need to continue to work these steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it, because it does. But the more that I trudge this path, the more freedom that I experience. It is an incredible way of life. So forward to the 3rd edition. Oh man, what I've got is a fun fact that's not fun, but it is a fact. And I'm like, oh man, I don't feel like I should share it, but I already prefaced it. So forward to the 3rd edition, here's the fact. It's not fun, but it is a fact. This is the first foreword that was not written by Bill Wilson. And the reason is because he had passed away. Yikes, just a real mood killer over here. So, forward to the 3rd edition. By March 1976, when this edition went to the printer, the total worldwide membership of Alcoholics Anonymous was conservatively estimated at more than 1 million. With almost 28,000 groups meeting in over 90 countries. So we're seeing this growth. Again, the growth is a sign that there is an answer here, that there is something that is working here. Surveys of groups in the United States and Canada indicate that AA is reaching out not only to more and more people, but to a wider and wider range. Women now make up more than 1/4 of the membership. Ooh, we bumped up to a quarter, in 76. Delightful. But again, it's far more diverse now. Among newer members, the proportion is nearly 1/3. 7% of the AA surveyed are less than 30 years of age. Among them, many in their teens. And one of the things that I will tell you, the real downside, there's not too many downsides of getting sober young, but there's two downsides. One, there's old timers that'll say, I spelt more on my tie than you ever drank. To which the non-spiritual response is, well, if you spelt less, you might have got here sooner. That might not be the thing to say. But the other downside is when I got here, 30 was ahead of me, and I'm like, under 30? Whoa, I am under that bar by a wide margin. And now 30's in the rear view mirror, and you just get a little like, that's the only downside. So it says the basic principles of the AA program. And again, I take a bit of a controversial view, not all the way controversial, because I still want you to like me. I haven't overcome that. But a little bit of a controversial view. A lot of people talk about the principles are these nebulous concepts behind the steps. So talking about the idea that, the principle behind step 1 is honesty, or the principle behind step 2 is hope. And if that is your track, or that is your opinion, or that is your idea, you're right. You're right. But I take a bit of a different view. Because for me, it's like that list is always different. You ask somebody, what's the principle behind step 1? You're going to get a different answer. But also find a step that doesn't involve honesty or willingness or humility. You know what I mean? But also, you guys know what it's like when you are just having a day. You're overtired, you're overcaffeinated, you're underslept, you're overstimulated, and you are on your last nerve. And it's like, when you would have the headphones that would catch in the door handle, and it's rage, I am not capable in that moment to pull tolerance out of my butt. And to be like, tolerance, I can't do it. Patience, it's not there. Can't find it, right? So for me, the principles are not the concepts behind the steps, but instead the principles are the tangible actions of the 12 steps. So, yeah, absolutely. So what do you need, right? We can't pull it out. Like, it's not like in the garden shed like the whippersnapper. What we got to do is we got to practice inventory, prayer, meditation, service, the 10th step. I can practice those tangible actions. So the principles for me are the actions of the 12 steps. And it says it appears hold good for individuals with many different lifestyles. Just as the program has brought recovery to those with many different nationalities. And I'm a big spiritual seeker. I love seeking from a variety of faith traditions, and my Step 11 practice is fun. I have a lot of fun. I do a lot of seeking. You don't have to. But one of the things that I found is that if it is true, it is true. If it is truth, it will apply, like all cultures, all societies, all religions. And what we seem to have stumbled across, and I don't know if we stumbled across it or God, higher power, spirit of the universe gave it to us. It's more that one, that we have some real truth. These spiritual principles, these actions of the 12 steps are truth. And they work regardless of where I come from. So, just as the program has brought recovery to those of many different nationalities, the 12 steps that summarize the program may be called Los 12 Pesos. I felt like I leaned too hard in on the accent. In one country, Les Deux Étapes, that's French, in another. But they trace exactly the same path to recovery. This is a path, this is a way of life that was blazed by the earliest members of Alcoholics Anonymous. In spite of the great increase in the size and span of this fellowship, at its core it remains simple and personal. Each day, somewhere in the world, recovery begins when one alcoholic talks with another alcoholic, sharing experience, strength, and hope. Experience, Strength, and Hope is the title of the book, where all the stories that were taken out over the course of the editions, you can get it in a book, Experience, Strength, and Hope. But what am I sharing my experience with? I'm sharing my experience with my alcoholism, the physical allergy, the mental obsession. I'm going to share, and it can also be helpful to share my experience with the spiritual malady, even though that's not diagnostic of alcoholism. But I also need to share my experience with the 12 steps and my experience with the spiritual awakening. And when I share strength, I promise you it is not my strength. I couldn't find that where I was looking for those other characteristics either. It is a strength that is beyond myself, the strength of a power greater than me, and a hope that is not my own. And so that's what we get to share. And I did a terrible job of leaving Peppa time. So with 2 minutes left, I'll give it over to Peppa. Thank you for your patience.